So it's the JasmineBrand.com. I'm here with producer, writer, and showrunner, Prentice. Did I forget any titles?
No, I think you got it all.
Okay, now prior to your work on Insecure, you were known for putting in a lot of work on other TV projects.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of, I guess, first explain how you kind of got in this industry?
Yeah, I mean, I went to film school for it at USC, and I was like most writers trying to hustle, trying to get my first job. So I was like a teacher. I worked at a nonprofit. I worked in a group home with foster kids. So I've done like a bunch of different things.
Okay.
And but I got my first job on Girlfriends.
Okay. So while you were in film school, you had you had other regular jobs while you were in film school and while you were trying to get TV gigs. Or?
Yeah, basically,
okay.
I'd be like I was the worst like substitute teacher because I was just kind of put a movie on and then be like, I need to work on my script. So I don't know, I'm sure I messed up tons of kids' education, but I was like, I'm a sub. What do you want from me?
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Well, when you were growing up, did you always know that you wanted to work in this arena? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I always wanted to do something creative. Like,
okay.
I was always interested in I grew up an only child. And so, you got to use your imagination a lot. And so, this is a time when, it was like 4 television stations, and your grandparents watched the news at like 3, 4, 5, 6, Jeopardy. Well, I didn't have no control over the TV. So I had to kind of make my own fun, and so I would just come up with stories and do things like that. And it just sort of became this.
Okay. What are some of the other TV projects you worked on besides Girlfriends?
So I started on Girlfriends, but I worked on Scrubs, a show called Happy Endings, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and then other things here, but those are like the biggest things that I worked on.
What was your what was the most challenging TV project that you worked on?
I mean, I think 2 were challenging in different ways. I think when I was on Girlfriends, what was great about that show was, it was a lot of people of color who wrote on the show. So I would describe it as like going to like Hillman, right? Mm-hmm. It was like everybody was very protective of me. There was no egos, there was no agendas. It was all like, how do we all come and support each other and succeed? So it was a great environment to learn because I got to learn without any sort of real, pressure of failure. Everything was about how do we make all of us succeed. So when I had to transition from that to being the only black writer on other shows, at first it was just, you just don't know what it's going to be like because you're like, this is the only experience I have, and so you don't know. I just was walking into a world where I was walking into the mainstream world, and it always sort of felt like shows about black people back then were about kind of like, oh, you're the Negro League show. Like, you're cool, you're making us money, but you're not, like, we don't hold you as high as the other shows, but we're just as good, but they just didn't hold us as high. And so I was walking into a world where, like, a lot of my white coworkers were like, would always have pilots or big overall studio deals, and I just wasn't seeing that, and I was just like, wow, this is like I'm hearing conversations that I didn't necessarily hear in my other world. And so I was just like, oh, this is sort of where the big dogs are playing, and this is where the opportunities are, unfortunately.
Right. Well, how were you able to kind of maneuver in that new space? Because for some people, they may not be able to thrive coming from a show like Girlfriends to go into a show where you were the only person of color. Like, how were you able to maneuver and thrive in that space?
Well, weirdly, how I grew up helped do that. Like, so growing up in the 80s, like now, like diversity is like a thing. It wasn't a thing when I was coming up. So when my parents divorced, they had this weird arrangement, which was my dad was very pro-black, and my mom was like, if it's white, it's right. So,
oh, great.
So it was very much like that. So they had this weird agreement when they divorced where if I went to the school in my neighborhood, which was all black, I had to go to summer camp and play sports with white kids. And if I went to a white school, my dad was like, he gotta play sports in the hood. So I basically grew up where I'd go to elementary school, listening to hip hop, but I'd go to this white summer camp where I was the only one. So they're listening to like Duran Duran, Culture Club, The Police, all these other white music stuff I wasn't listening to. So then I had to spend all summer learning all these white songs, but then I wasn't learning any more hip hop. So I go back to school and I'd be like, hey guys, you heard of Cyndi Lauper? And they was like, what? We ain't messing with that. So then I had to learn all the black. So I did this for like 8 years. So where I was always kind of bouncing in between these worlds. And so growing, so when that time came when I had to even go to film school, there were only 2 black students in my film program, like myself and another woman. And then so shifting jobs, I wasn't uncomfortable being the only one.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? Because I kind of grew up
in that vein,
going back and forth between worlds like that. I mean, sadly, I wish I was to a degree, but sadly, I got to be able to navigate that.
Gotcha. switching gears just a little bit, Girlfriends I want to talk about just for a second. Would you be open to a Girlfriends type show come back, or Girlfriends coming back? Or
that's all on Mara. That's all, you know, you got to talk to Mara.
Well, I know, but would you be, I mean...
I mean, it's so funny, like, I love Mara, I talk to Mara a lot. Like, one of the writers that also hired me, Regina Hicks, who hired me, she works on Insecure with me now. The other, one of the writers with Karen Gist runs Star for Fox. So, like, we all talk, we all see each other, we all just love each other as people.
Right.
So, like, a million times, yeah, and those characters are fun to write for sure.
Okay. Let's talk about your role in Insecure. How did you sort of connect with Issa?
So, I was on Brooklyn Nine-Nine at the time, and I was just looking for, always, like, how do I challenge myself? How do I do something different? How do I do something new? And then when I saw that Larry Wilmore, who created with her, who would have been the showrunner, got his show on Comedy Central, the nightly show, and so they needed a showrunner. And I knew of Issa, and my mom had told me about Issa a while ago, just because we're from the same neighborhood. And she was like, baby, you gotta see what this girl's doing. She grew up right by us. And so I was like, that's dope, you know what I mean? And you don't know it's gonna become this thing, you know what I mean? So many, you know, pilots just kind of come and go. But I read the script and I was like, oh, this is, like, it's my life. It's a lot of black people's lives, you know what I mean? And so when I read it, I was like, I don't trust somebody's gonna mess this up. So I was like, this is too special. This is too unique. This is too right now. And so I wrote her a letter about why I thought I'd be a good showrunner for her. And
how did you get to her?
So one of my agents went to college with her. So they knew each other from Stanford. So I was like, look, you got to get me to meet this chick. Like, I don't care. Whatever I got to do, like, I'm down. And so she was like, why don't you write her a letter? And I was like, yeah, sure, I will write her a letter. So I wrote that broad a letter. I talked about why I would be a good fit, what I related to in the script, what I thought was special about her, what I thought I could offer. And she read it and she was like, let's meet. And then we met at her book signing for, like, I want to say we talked 15 minutes, maybe. And then, but the vibe was just, you know, when you click with somebody, you just like, you don't have to like say a bunch of stuff, but we just clicked and we were like, yeah, let's do this. And that was 2.5 years ago. Here we go.
Where's that letter?
It's on my computer.
Okay.
I should frame it.
You need to.
I should frame it.
You need to.
It's also a reminder, I told my wife, it's also a reminder of like humility, right? Like it was a thing where like when she said write her a letter, I could have been like,
I
don't need to do all that. But
right.
I was like, this is special. Like it's like, I was watching The Defiant Ones the other day on HBO. And one of the things that I love that Jimmy Iovine talks about is like, you know, lose the ego and like be great. And I was like, this is great. And I can recognize that her writing is great. And I think what she's doing is great. And I just want to be a part of something that's great. And that was just such a constant reminder. Like, oh, yeah. You got to be around great stuff. You got to do what you got to do.
Perfect. Your role in the show is showrunner. That's your title. But for those of us that are not in the industry, what does that mean?
So the showrunner, then, it's like my duties kind of changed, at least over the last 2 years. But for the most part, you know, Issa had never done like a network television show before, so it's like you need somebody to sort of help you do that with you, you know? And so my job, along with that, like once I got hired, was for us to find our pilot director, and obviously like my job for the pilot is different on my day-to-day. So like my day-to-day is like when we got picked up, it's hiring writers and reading their scripts and deciding who we're going to put together in the writer's room. It's meeting with directors and deciding which directors we're going to use that season. It's Issa and I figuring out what's the story going to be about this year. What are the characters going through? We sort of arc out like a loose version of the season. Then we come back and tell the writers, this is what we want to do this year. We supervise all the outlines, supervise all the writing, supervise all the rewrites, supervise all the casting, supervise all the music. When we're on set, I'm on set with the director saying, no, I need to take like this or this like that or whatever. And then supervising editing, supervising all the music that gets put in, supervising all the coloring that goes into how it looks finally. So everything you see from like inception of the season to, oh, I loved it, I love the finale, that's what a showrunner is responsible for.
That sounds like a lot.
Responsible for, yeah.
Oh my gosh, is this not your first?
No, it's not my first time showrunning. I did a small show for this network called Fuse a few years ago, which ironically is so funny because Daniel, who's in Insecure, I cast him as the lead in my show. That's how we found him here. So it's like, it's funny how things all kind of come full circle in a weird way.
What's the hardest part of, I guess, about your job as a showrunner?
I mean, they're all like, things are hard in different ways. Like everything is like, sometimes like an obstacle. You're like, okay, it can be trying to find the right casting for this part because this part's really important. Or this is the part we see, you know, being here for a long time. It could be oh, we don't have this location. We lost the location. Now we got to rewrite this scene based on the location we have now. So it really varies. Like, I don't know if there's a part that's like, this is the hard part. It kind of varies day to day. It could be, guys, we don't have like the end of the story figured out. We got to figure it out. Sometimes you got to break it all down and then be like, oh, that's it, and then rebuild it. Sometimes it's just the nebulousness of knowing that I don't have a story to start my day, and just knowing I know I'll have one by 6, but I don't know how I'm going to get there. That's, you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of sometimes the scariest part. And just trusting, because history tells you, you'll figure it out.
Right.
But it's in that morning at 10 a.m., 10:30, you're like, well, I don't have it. You know what I mean? And so all that goes into the root of kind of making it, you know?
Okay. In terms of the series, how surprised, or are you surprised at all that it's so successful?
Completely. I mean, again, like, we were kind of talking before we started, and one of the things is, like, I've been a part of shows that were starting from the beginning. I was a part of Happy Endings, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and now this, where you're starting, you don't know, like, the audience has no preconceptions about what the show is.
Right.
And so you're kind of creating something from scratch. Like, you don't know. It's just like if you were starting this. You know what I mean? It's like, you don't know if what you're doing is going to resonate. All you know is, I believe something I'm doing is special. I believe something I'm doing is unique. I believe that what I'm doing is kind of interesting. But you don't know. You know what I mean? You just know that I'm into it and this is interesting for all of us.
Right.
But you don't know. So I literally had no expectation. I didn't know what the expectation was going to be. I didn't know people were going to, like, love it, hate it, be mixed about it. I mean, you just don't. You know, there's no. So when I had no expectations, I didn't have a low expectation.
Right.
I just didn't know what the response was going to be, and so to see people's response to it is like, that's amazing. So
before, before it came out, were you nervous? Were you up at night? Were you like, you forgot about it, you started working on something else? Or I'm just trying to get your headspace before.
I think before, it was so weird, like before it came on, we had done all the episodes, so we had filmed and we were done with all the stuff like around the same time we are now, like kind of like late July, early August. We were kind of done. We weren't airing till October. So in a way, it was kind of like, it's just sort of this thing sitting on a shelf for a minute. You know what I mean? Like, we were doing like a tiny bit of press stuff. Like, we'd go to Essence, like we talked about. We went to New York in December, September. But what started happening was I started going off to do upscale to a degree. So all of our energy sort of came down for a while. There was all this energy, like, get it done, but then we kind of chilled it out. But slowly, what happening is when because they send stuff to press. Like, HBO will, like most networks, will send all your stuff to press and sort of see what people are feeling or thinking. And once the stuff started coming in from press that, like, this is the hottest show, this is a top 10 show, you need to be watching this show is amazing. That's when it was like, oh shit, we might kind of have something. You know what I mean?
Right.
And once that started happening, we started being in all these lists and all these articles and all this. That's when you're like, oh, this might be kind of interesting and unique.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about the cast a bit. They seem really organic. I felt like it's kind of like a bunch of friends.
They are.
So was that, in terms of casting the series, was that done in the traditional way? Like, was there an audition for everyone? Or
obviously we knew who Issa was. But all the other characters, like, Molly, Lawrence, Daniel. It was so funny because it's so funny how you find people, right? Like, Jay, I think, is who we found the most traditional way, which is Vicky Thomas, who's our casting person, who's awesome, brought Jay in. And it was funny because Jay was one of the first actors we saw for Lawrence. And we were just like, wow, he's really good. And he could do the comedy good, and he could do the drama really good. And we're just like, okay. But then we started seeing a bunch of, but we were like, this is too early. Like, we probably didn't find him. He's good, so let's keep him on the list.
Right.
And then when you start going through, we would find other people, and also we found Alon. So Alon, I said, hey, you got to see my boy. Alon came in and read for Lawrence. Also, ironically, the actor who plays Chad, Neil Brown Jr. from Straight Outta Compton, came in for Lawrence. And so all these guys started coming in for Lawrence. And it was funny because we went to network. You take like your top picks to network. So Alon went to network. Neil went to network as Lawrence, and Jay went to network as Lawrence. And it's so funny that they all have parts in the show because they were all so good. But what was clear was like, oh, Jay is Lawrence. And then once we did that, Issa was like, well, we should just make Alon Daniel. And it was like, great. And then when the character Chad came up, we were like, we should just give it to Neil. He's so good. And that's literally how those things happen, because those are the three top guys that we saw for the show, and now they all have roles. But Yvonne came because Issa had seen her, I think, do a comedy thing before, and so, and again, like Alon came in because I'd worked with him before. I was like, this guy's dope. We should meet with this guy. So those were that's sort of how those pieces sort of came organically.
Okay. The teaser's out for season 2.
Yes.
Are you nervous?
Nah. I'm actually not. I'm too busy to be nervous.
Right, okay.
Like I'm way too busy. And the show comes on in like 8 days, so it's like it's what it is.
Yeah. Okay. How do you think fans are gonna react?
I think fans. I tell fans, if you thought season 1 was like, yo, I'm like, strap up, because season 2 is like we hitting 100 out the gate and ain't slowing down. There's no slowdown. There's zero chill. There's no slowdown. We like it's going hard in the paint. So like. From the first episode, it's out there. So
okay, I can't wait. Now you're married.
Yes.
And I always feel like people that are married, they like pillow talk about like, you know, what's going on with work. How much do you tell your wife, or does she not care about what's going on with the series?
She does not want to know anything
ahead of time.
No, she's like, we went to Essence. She was like, don't tell me anything. So she saw the episode for the first time in Essence. It was like, oh my God, that's crazy. How could you just hit me? No, my God. So she was like, I don't ever want to know anything.
Okay, that's hilarious. If there's one thing that you could alter about the series.
Ooh, that's a good question. I can tell you what I'm interested in doing more of, which we started doing this year. I'm excited to start playing more with the way we tell the story, and maybe not being so linear sometimes. Like I think as you'll see in the season, we start to play with like time, and the way we tell a story, and the way we tell a story through one character. You'll just find interesting ways that we tell a story. So I'm excited that it worked, and that we can like branch out and try to find more interesting ways to tell our stories.
Okay. During a recent interview, you said, quote, people of color never get to be flawed on TV. What did you mean by that?
I mean that I feel like we have to be extraordinary all the time. Like we can't, like, you know, it's no knock on any of those movies, but we always have to be this, so we're sort of the morality. I always feel like we're the morality of a mainstream world, right? It's like it's easy to point to like 42 and movies like that and go, of course they're being discriminated against, and Jackie Robinson, the portrayal of that has to be perfect, right? And Hidden Figures the same way. We have to sort of be on this sort of uber side of right. And I'm like, well, we don't operate like that in a normal day. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, of course, that situation is like yields itself that's wrong, and these are people who overcome great things, but they were flawed people. Do you know what I mean? And so I think that we never get to just be kind of basic and flawed. It's either we have to be perfect and like nothing can be wrong with us. We have to dance great and do this great and be super dressed, put together, and it's like we can't just be like simple.